Oh, I hated it, man. I hate the hustle mindset, actually. I think it's really stupid.
What's going on, guys? My name is Luis Raza, and welcome back to another episode of Crushing It, a podcast dedicated to inspiring young individuals to pursue their passion by showcasing other individuals who are doing exactly that. Again, I'm your host, Luis Raza, and today's guest is Mandeep Patel. Welcome to the show, man.
Good to be here, man.
Yeah, so now, Mandeep, when I go to the gym, I go in there and I work out, and I'm done. But you go in there and you meet the Whole Foods CEO. How does that work?
Yeah, that was hilarious. Okay, so this is long story, and I'll condense it for you. At one point in time when I was in college, I would Airbnb my place out on the weekend and basically crash at a friend's place, sleep at the ETC, which was terrible. Just find different ways to not be at my place and Airbnb it out, right? Because South by Southwest, you make like $1,000 a weekend, and it's like, why not? And so I realized, okay, I'm making pretty good money with this, but I need to shower, and I don't want to keep crashing at my friend's place and being like, yo, you got a clean towel for me? Yeah, clean towel for me. So eventually I was like, I'm making a lot of money. Let me splurge on the gym membership. So I get the only gym membership with a steam room in a 2-mile radius, because I love steam rooms.
And was this in Austin?
It's in Austin. Yep, okay. Right across from the Whole Foods, actually, the actual Whole Foods on North Lamar. There's a gym called Mecca Gym and Spa, and they've got a steam room and everything. Very upscale, $150 a month. So you got people coming in there that kind of have some cash.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about networking there, which was stupid. That was the dumbest mistake I've made, because I realize now how many powerful and important people go there. But while I was there one day, this dude, he walks into the locker room, and I'm just like, hey man, how's it going? He says hi, and that's pretty normal. And he sees that I guess he sees that I'm kind of young, so he just asked me a question. He's like, what do you think about Whole Foods, right? As a millennial, what do you think about Whole Foods? And at the time, Trader Joe's blowing up, right? Trader Joe's super convenient. You just walk in. Prices are pretty competitive compared to Whole Foods. So I say, there's too much outward pressure. I don't think you guys are I don't think Whole Foods is going to keep growing. And he says, that's interesting. Okay. And, we get ready, and I'm like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. And I go home, and I'm like, that is such a weird question to ask, right? We're right across from Whole Foods. Yeah. This guy comes in, and he's like, what do you think about Whole Foods? So I Google Whole Foods executive team, and I start at the bottom, because I'm like, oh, this guy's probably, just like an accountant or something. And I'm scrolling up. I get to the top, and I see his face. And I was
my God.
Oh my God. What have I done? And man, it was ridiculous, right? You don't expect to see a CEO at the gym with you. So
wait, and this was in 2015, right?
2015.
Okay, and then you wrote about it, and that got some attention, and then now you had I don't know when it was, but recently you actually had a phone call with him, right?
Yeah, exactly. So 2018, 3 years later, he still remembered me, and I reached out to his basically his assistant and said, hey, I was that kid. My calls weren't so great back then, but I'm working on something now, and I kind of want his opinion on it. And that's what got me that 30-minute meeting with him at Whole Foods, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so Airbnb stuff out, all of that stuff, that relates to that's the general entrepreneur mindset, hustling mindset. But did you always have this, or growing up, were you thinking differently about your career path?
No, I hated it, man. I hate the hustle mindset, actually. I think it's really stupid. I'll explain why, because that's a pretty controversial statement. But basically, when I grew up, I experienced the effects of shitty entrepreneurship. So my family didn't do so well in the business space, right? There's a point where my dad opened up a motel, as most brown men do. It's either that or gas station. My dad chose hotel or motel. And so for 2 years, man, I lived in Hempstead, this little town 80 miles or 50 miles north of Houston, in one motel room with my mom, my dad, myself, and my little sister. We all lived in that one room, because there was no way to make ends meet unless we moved out of our house and lived there. And that taught me at a very young age that entrepreneurship, when not structured well, can really mess up your life, and if you have a family, also your family's life. So I don't like the hustler mindset that doesn't think through to the end. At least, plans don't always go through, right? Plans can fail, and you have to adapt. But if you don't have an end game and you're just hustling, you aren't going to be in a position where you're stable. And I think that's one of the reasons why I chose engineering, because I was like, oh, this is a cool fallback, right? Worst case scenario, I'm in a very employable field, right? Very employable position. and it ended up being something that I didn't want to do, and we can definitely talk about that more. But I guess to summarize this question, I respect a hustler's ambition, but they definitely need to see the plan all the way through to the end.
So what have you changed then from what you've seen in the past about a hustler's mindset?
So my co-founder, Taylor Zhao for Sunco, is really, really good about being very regimented, having these plans set in place, understanding what his goals are and working towards those. I've learned a lot of that from him and working with him, and it's helped me a lot. It also has changed my mindset in that I have realized that things that are worth doing take time, right? Anybody can Airbnb their apartments during South by Southwest, right? That's not something that has a high barrier to entry, right? You can do it in a week, right? You can set it up. Changing the solar industry or making electric vehicles more adoptable, that takes time, that you're going to be doing that with no success for at least a year and a half, right? And if you can live past that point, I think that's what separates you from like the real entrepreneurs and like just the hustlers. And don't people shouldn't take offense if they call themselves a hustler. Like they might be doing it the right way, right? They might be so driven and dedicated to seeing a plan all the way through, and that's fine. I'm talking about the people that don't recognize the necessity for a strong foundation.
Okay. And so do you basically associate entrepreneurship, like real entrepreneurship, with innovation then? Because that's kind of what I'm hearing. Because like changing the solar industry, that's innovating. But if you just have like a small business on the side, you're technically still considered an entrepreneur in this day and age.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna get hate for this, but I think I'm gonna stick to it, man. I think an actual entrepreneur, is gonna seek some type of innovation. It doesn't have to be all tech, right? It doesn't have to be hard tech, but it has to be either a business model innovation that they can defend, or it does have to be tech.
Okay, and so you did talk about innovating in terms of like the solar adoption. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Specifically what I'm doing in that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Sunco was just an idea. It was just an idea for the longest time. And then we entered this competition called the Shell Ideas 360 Challenge. 757 teams across the globe. The finals were in London. We went and won that whole competition. It put us in front of a ridiculous number of venture capitalists. Genesis program here on campus took notice of us when we won that competition and invited us to apply, and that's what really kickstarted the entire journey. Because for the first time, we had to go through the process of how do we take this idea and make it an actual product, and then once we made it into a product, that wasn't good enough because we went to the finals of the competition, and having a product wasn't good enough. Every team there had a product. We had to immediately think about the market, building a business plan, things like that.
Okay, and so how did you navigate that? Because we can all talk about how you went and got and like won that competition, right? But like, what was that process like? Like, what did you have to change? Because a lot of people come from an engineering background and they only know how to make that product and et cetera, right? They don't know how to take it from a product to a business. So how did you get past that barrier?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to recognize that engineering is not, this is so cliche, man, and this is like the canned pitch for people saying, oh, you can do consulting, oh, you can do investment banking, but really engineering is not a set of skills, it's more of a mindset. You learn a lot of things about different fields, right? Especially in mechanical engineering. You'll learn, mechatronics, you'll learn materials, you'll learn dynamics. All three of those fields have some overlap, but they're different pieces of information. What unifies them is this thought process that's really methodical, right? Okay, I know I have these pieces of information. This is the outcome I want. What process am I going to take in order to get to that specified outcome? Now, the engineering process doesn't teach you how to properly do like customer interviews and stuff, and that's something you're going to learn. You're just going to fall and learn and just keep hustling, right? Yeah. Keep going. Like, you're going to have to keep trying. But the engineering mindset can be effectively used for these types of problems.
Okay, it's funny that you say that, because when we're doing technical interviews for computer science, it's not necessarily that you have some sort of technical background. Right. Yeah, you know the language and whatnot, but the main question that you're asked, it's more of, do you know how to use the tools that you have in your mind in order to get to that solution? So I like that you said that. It's more of like you can take this set of skills and apply that to business.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So Sunco then, what exactly is it? Because we were talking about the competition.
Absolutely, yeah. So what we do with Sunco, we identified a need for a really low-cost solar tracker. So most solar trackers are incredibly expensive. They use a bunch of motors and sensors, and it actually siphons power off of the solar panel. So you end up having a system that's incredibly costly when the whole point of it was to reduce the cost of solar energy. We used shape memory alloys. These are metals that contract when they're heated and expand when they're cold. in order to create a very simplified system. So it's not as effective at tracking the sun as these really complicated active systems, but it's about 90% less expensive. So when you don't have to worry about real estate or something like that, you can use our system and lower your overall cost of solar energy. So a solar tracker, for people that may not be familiar, keeps a panel facing the sun throughout the day, right? And the way that it was done was motors and sensors. We use this shape memory alloy to do the exact same thing at a lower price point.
Okay, and why haven't like other corporations and stuff taken on this?
So it's actually funny. Shape memory alloys, the aerospace industry loves them. They're used commonly in spacecraft, and Boeing is trying to use them on their plane wings. I was actually at their research lab in A&M. Funnily enough, like, I'm a Longhorn. I did research with A&M. And while I was there, it was kind of funny because they were trying to use it on plane wings. Well, one of the biggest problems with that was rapid cooling. You know, you're so high up, there's convective heat transfer coming off the plane wing, so it's hard to use that alloy to actuate the wing, right? Well, people kept thinking, like, if only the plane could fly on the ground, like, if only the plane was, like, on the ground, this would be so much easier. And I kept thinking to myself, like, what needs to be moved on the ground that's similar to this, right? And so some people were saying, like, oh, maybe we can use it for a greenhouse to regulate temperature. Maybe we can use it in a nuclear reactor. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, we're trying to follow a heat source. What else needs to follow the biggest heat source in the sky, a solar panel? And that's when I decided to do it. I think the reason why companies don't necessarily immediately have that thought process is because they have product lines that are profitable, right? So they have like their motor and sensor driven solar tracker that's profitable, right? And for them, it's all about reducing the cost of that or increasing the efficiency, because they're already selling it, right? If they were to drastically go out and develop the R&D and do something different, it wouldn't really make sense, right? Because they're devoting R&D to a product that they haven't proven in the market, whereas you're already getting money from this thing. You just got to figure out how to make it cheaper or better.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of those corporations end up having like separate, like Red Bull has their Launch Institute program where they invest in startups because they can afford to put money into it because they'll be getting back something.
It's very true. A lot of companies have started doing that now. Shell, most notably, invests heavily in startups. They have Game Changers. They have the Ideas 360 program. They have their own venture arm that focuses on investments in the energy transition. So
it's a interesting era that we live in. I never thought that this would be what we end up being at, like the stage.
Definitely. It's kind of funny, right? Because these guys have the most resources, the best talent. They should be the ones that are pioneering things, right? And startups maybe do the support structure for them, but it's inverted, right? Companies are the ones supporting the startups with like talent and capital and maybe like supply chain expertise, which is talent. And then like the startups are the ones innovating, which is cool.
Yeah, but I want to go on a sidetrack here and hear your thoughts on this. And it's that, do you ever feel like they're like the big four? Like you got like Microsoft, you got like Shell, whatever. Like, you know, the really big companies. Do you feel like it's kind of like an unfair advantage that they have that you can never actually, like in my eyes, you can never become them if they're the ones that are like investing in you? Because in a way that like when they all start investing in these startups, right? Eventually, when they grow, they're either going to get acquired by like an Amazon or like a Microsoft or something, and now you're suddenly a part of this big tech giant. But as a startup, you never have really the ability to become a tech giant yourself.
Yeah, man, that's very interesting. I love that you brought that up. I think that is what they're trying to do, right? What's the point for them to invest, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in these up and coming guys that may fail? Yeah. Because they don't want you to be that next big player, right? So they know that, if they can take this initial investment now, and there are very few people that are driven enough to be like, hey, I just got 100, Elon Musk, right?
Yes.
Dude's a badass. They gave him a huge check for PayPal, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to put this in a rocket and an EV company. Like most people don't do that, right? Yeah. Most people say, okay, I'm cool. I got $100 million. Just if I put it in like the safest, like 30-year treasury bonds, just off the interest, I'm like in the top 0.1% of America, right? Like they're done. Like most people don't have the ambition to fight those guys. So I think very interesting that you brought that up. I think what they're doing is making it easy enough for you to succeed with their backing, but that much harder for you to actively compete with them.
Okay, and so I'm glad that you brought up Elon Musk, because after looking at your profile and just like all the research that I did on you, right? And obviously I need to in order for this podcast to go well. But the only thing that I saw like that was very like to draw similarities, like that's what I do, right? Like in order to figure out where you're actually going with everything. And one thing that I saw was that two startups, like you're trying to run two companies at once, you're doing solar energy, like everything like kind of panders to, you know, Elon Musk kind of like a vibe, right?
Sure.
So is that kind of who you look up to or no?
So I do look up to him, but if you're asking me if I'm like him, I would say no. Like
No, I mean, I'm not saying like you're
Yeah.
like him. I'm saying like that. Is that like who you look
Yeah,
up to? Like, is
yeah.
that your role model,
Oh, yeah,
or is there someone else?
No, Elon Musk definitely is the kind of guy that, I mean, you know, he's got a lot of controversy, right,
Yeah.
surrounding him. But as far as what he's done with his businesses, it's so funny because Tesla's like one of the only stocks where the people that are long and the people that are short are both like, we're absolutely right? The people that think it's going to zero,
Yeah.
you can never convince them that it's not, right? And the
Yeah.
people that think it's going to go to the moon, well, they're unconvincible. And that kind of polarization where Elon has the courage to say, like, I know this is the right thing to do. I know this is the path that we need to move forward. That's really cool. And that's admirable to me. I think that's really impressive.
Okay, and sidetrack here again, and you got something signed by him. What was that?
Oh yeah. So it's not that big of a deal because I thought it was,
Yeah.
but it's not that big of a deal. It's not like hand signed. It's like, you know, machined.
Ah,
The point is, it's one of the cool things. So the other company that I run, it really does encourage EV ownership, right? We
Yeah.
make it really easy for people to buy electric vehicles, and as a consequence of that, we end up referring a lot of Teslas, right? We end up, you know, a lot of people use a Tesla for the first time through what I do, and then they buy it. So as a reward for referring people to Tesla, they give you stuff.
Okay.
And that was one of the things they gave.
Okay,
It was a charger. It was a home charger. That's it.
And do you use it?
I don't actually. I sold it so I could. I legit. I sold it on eBay to pay for advertisements.
Oh, okay.
Legit. Yeah.
That's the hustler mindset.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so let's backtrack. I don't want to get into ElecTrip
All
just
good.
yet, but Sunco, you actually presented at UPenn, right? And you
I
guys are now representing the U.S. in Berlin, right?
So we did that actually. It was in November, and that was really cool. It was.
do you want to go into details about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I guess we could. Okay. So the UN has these sustainable development goals. There are a lot of really smart people on campus trying to work towards meeting those goals, right, in different areas. So the competition was sponsored so that we could kind of like help them do that. And it was weird, man. I don't know why they chose me to go. Like everybody else there was a PhD, right?
Yeah.
Everybody else was like, oh, I'm a Stanford PhD. Yeah, what's up? I'm from Harvard. Oh, I'm from Oxford. And I'm just like, I'm an undergrad from UT. What's going on? And it was just like so weird. The head of the Nobel Peace Prize Foundation was there.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, I have nothing to give you. Like you are talking to much more impressive people than me. So the point I guess I'm trying to make is, you know, if I want to maybe convey what I learned from it.
Yeah, kind of like that. That's like what I'm trying to get.
Yeah,
at.
so I had to pay for my ticket to UPenn, and I didn't really think much of it. Like, I didn't think I would make it, right? And I did. And then when I got there, I didn't think that these people cared about what I was saying, but they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just say that what I learned from that was just go for it, especially if you're not super resource constrained.
Mm-hmm.
Try to do things that are kind of like long shots, you know?
Okay. And how long have you been doing Sunco for?
So Sunco was just an idea for the longest time since I was a sophomore.
Okay.
I really got
I
into-
remember speaking to you when you were actually, I remember meeting you at the collab after an event, and like I just like asked you a question about Sunco, and like you went off, like you like started
Oh,
talking
really?
about, I was like, man, this
That's
is, I was like, this is what you call someone that's like passionate about their startup. Like after that, I was like, okay, if I'm not passionate about what I'm doing as much as that guy, then I shouldn't be doing it. So that's really cool that you're still working on it till this day.
For sure, yeah.
And what's next for it then?
So Sunco needs to, okay, so we just finished up our patent work, right? And so what needs to happen now is doing test runs so that we can say, hey, in any weather circumstance, this thing will work, right? So the last 6 to 8 months, we've basically been stress testing it and creating improvements on the design. Every time we create an improvement on the design, we put that in the application, right? Put that in the patent application, make edits. And then we've gotten to the point where we feel that we think that this final design can go for 1 year on a roof and survive, right? So we're at that point.
Okay.
That's what we need to validate.
Okay.
So we're actually working with some really cool strategic partners. This is actually a new announcement. So first time for your podcast. Shell encouraged us to apply to this program called the Net Impact Awards or Net Impact Challenge. It's they basically want to help, you know, transition energy to a more sustainable future.
Okay.
And so Sunco was put into that competition. We're moving on to the finals now. And
Oh, wow.
basically the result of that is really, really cool because it's potential partnerships with large companies like Shell, which really help increase our credibility, right? Because right now it's me and Taylor. Taylor is a graduate at UT. Yeah, he just graduated. I'm an undergrad.
Yeah.
it's hard for people to be like, do these two kids really have something that large companies can't do? And I mean, this kind of circles back to the beginning of the conversation, right? Where we kind of need their support, but it helps.
Okay, and so I mean that's a great like stopping point for Sunco, because you're doing big things and great things with Sunco, but you still ended up starting ElecTrip, which is your second company, right? And I want to address one problem before we actually get into what ElecTrip is, and is that it's very like frowned upon to start like a second company while you're already like
100%.
doing a one company, because it like it's a trade-off between focus and attention, right? And all the articles you read about, you can't give 100% to one company. So why did you decide to start ElecTrip if you knew Sunco was doing so well?
Yeah, so two things. I didn't know that Sunco was doing that well, but I didn't base my decision on that. It wasn't the decision calculus wasn't made based on, oh, what if Sunco fails, right? Because if Sunco failed, the next best bet would have been to get a full-time job. It would have been really nice and easy for a UT mechanical engineering graduate, to get a good position. So when I started ElecTrip, it wasn't because I was like, oh, what if Sunco doesn't work? The reason why I launched ElecTrip was because I recognized a hole in the market that needed to be filled now. And I knew that if I waited, it would take way too long for me to ramp up, and other companies could come in and just like stomp me out, right?
Okay.
And so, yes, the trade-off, I hear it every single time. It's actually so ironic because all these competitions, every time we talk to VCs, it's always for both companies, and they see me on both boards, they see my roles in both companies, and they're like, what are you doing? How are you able to do this? And it's hard, man. It's a huge learning curve. I learned more about time management doing that than anything else. But okay, differential equations here, right?
Yeah.
That taught me less about time management than running two companies, because you need it, man. So
I mean, it puts a fire under your ass per se when you have like two companies to run. I mean, the only other comparison, and that's like, that's why I brought up Elon Musk, and it's like that's like the person that you look at. It's like, oh, he's managing like 3 companies, doing 4 different projects, 5 different projects, and he's like doing well in all of them. So I mean, we'll get into how you're managing all of this a little later, but what is ElecTrip exactly?
Okay, yeah, sure. So ElecTrip started out, when we first started it, I just put all my life savings in one Tesla. And we wanted to make the travel experience between cities a little bit better. We decided, okay, let's sell individual seats in the car and drive it between Houston and Austin. When we found that didn't work, we looked at what, I guess I can give you the elevator pitch. I don't know why I'm doing this. Anyway, here, I'll start over on that. So,
Go ahead.
So ElecTrip basically, if you look at all the other options for travel in Texas, they kind of suck, right? So like flying really sucks.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be in the air for 40 minutes, but you have to spend an hour getting harassed by TSA. Stupid. The second one is taking a bus. Preset schedule, common pickup and drop off, no privacy.
Yeah.
And if you take something like Von Lane, you're not really saving that much in cost. The worst is driving. And I'm talking about all this in terms of corporate, right? If you're taking a team of 2 and 3. Because if you're taking a team of 2 and 3, you're putting someone behind the wheel after a 10-hour conference while they've been on their feet. Huge liability for drowsy driving, right? What happens if those people get into an accident? They also can't be productive while they're driving to another city. We created ElecTrip because we realized, okay, there's a huge gap for this, where there's a low-cost, sustainable, comfortable, kind of hit every peg option between major cities in Texas. We identified that there are 6 other national markets that you could be addressing with this kind of service. So our goal was to pilot it here, make sure that it worked, and then move to other places in the nation. What we discovered in the process of creating that company was that the biggest question mark on all these transportation companies is, how do we get our cars? And do we want that liability on our balance sheet? Because buying $100,000 Teslas is not a repeatable business model, right? It's not sustainable in the ramp-up period. And that's the criticism I would always get from people. How are you going to continue to buy $100,000 Teslas? And that's not an answer that I had, right? So what we looked at was, okay, a lot of people buy Teslas, and it's really, really common for these owners to put their vehicles on. Have you heard of Turo?
No.
Turo. So Turo basically is Airbnb for cars. Okay. You can put your car up for rent to anybody.
Oh, wow.
And Tesla owners, as according to the Turo CEO, were putting their cars up for 7 days a month and making $1,000. So their entire car payment for 7 days out of the month. Here's the drawback. Anybody can rent your car, right? You don't know if they've ever driven an EV before. And they are very different to drive. I'll be happy to take you guys around later, but they're very different. You could potentially get into an accident, and then your new Tesla that you freaking love, it's gone, right? And yeah, sure, insurance covers it, but do you really want to go through that risk and headache? Our model's a lot different because we only use professional drivers. So these are people that are background checked, trained specifically on how to drive EVs, and are constantly monitored through the hardware in the car for their driving behavior.
Okay.
So we make sure that if you're renting your car out to us, it's in a much better ecosystem.
Okay, and did you, like, I mean, I don't think anyone just sitting there could, like, come up with this. Did you come up with it because you used Turo before?
Yes,
or like, okay.
absolutely. Yeah, I used Turo before when we first launched the service, when times weren't at peak. When demand wasn't at peak, we would put the car on Turo. We put our 2 cars on Turo.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, this is inefficient, right? Imagine you, okay, so like let's say you're a pretty well-to-do guy, right? And you say, okay, I'm going to buy my Tesla.
Yeah.
You're going to be at work for 10, 12 hours. You know, you're a pretty ambitious, career-driven person. Your work shifts aren't 6, 7 hours, right?
Yeah.
You're there at the office for quite a long amount of time. Well, that entire time, that car's doing nothing for you. It's just sitting there, right? So if we can take that car and pay you to use it so that at the end of the month you're actually net positive on your vehicle, I think that's a pretty cool deal, right? Because for us, it means we only match our supply when we have the requisite demand.
Okay, so you said you came up with Turo from using it so many times, and then that's kind of how you got the idea for ElecTrip, right?
Yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit about the valuation of what ElecTrip is.
Yeah.
So, like, can you give us a little bit of context on that?
Yeah, so it's actually funny, like VCs love it when founders will bullshit their valuations. I think it like makes them believe like something, right? Like they want to back something that they feel like, I'm going to be able to be like, I was the first backer for this like brand new thing.
Yeah.
With ElecTrip, we used to do very low valuations based on cash flow. It's what you would do it's like what Warren Buffett does. But the way I do it now, as according to the VC rule, is a little bit of what the potential market could be. So in Texas, 220,000 people travel between the 4 major cities every single week for work. So these are professionals that are doing this weekly. They're called super commuters. There's 6 other national markets just like Texas with equal potential. We think, based on our current projections and growth rate, that by the end of this year, based on the number of rides we're doing, we'll be at $1.5 million conservatively of evaluation and $3 million if we can really hit all of our goals.
Okay. From
From there, if we expand to each of the 6 national markets with a franchising model where we license out our software, that'll increase our valuation 2-fold, 3-fold, 4-fold for each market that we can get successful penetration into.
Okay, and so that 1.5 million evaluation, how many rides are you doing right now, and then how many rides are required in order to hit that valuation?
Yeah, so we do exactly. So we do about 1.5 rides a day right now.
Okay.
We'll spike during certain months, like the holiday months. We start getting a lot more demand from consumers that are trying to get their like parents around and stuff. So affluent individuals that don't want to drive and want a much safer, more efficient service for their retired parents or whatnot. But right now we do about 1.5 rides a day conservatively.
Okay.
We plan on adding 30 rides a month all the way up to December in order to hit that valuation.
Okay.
One thing about our service is that it's pretty premium. The per ride price is higher than what most other services charge. The reason why it ends up being compelling for the customer is that per person, that ride price is pretty low, right? So from Houston to Austin, we charge $250 for the entire car with custom pickup and drop off. If you have 3 people traveling with you, that's about $80. It's about $80 a person, right? That's not that bad, especially when you consider that Von Lane charges $90 and you have to Uber to that stop. So that's something where we can be a little bit more competitive.
Okay.
Our Teslas also, they have 5 seats, so you could divide that $250 number by 5 and do $50 a seat. But really where this comes into play is like, okay, I'm a lawyer, right? I have my 2 aides with me, and I'm going to go to Dallas, right? If I take the Von Lane, I can't bill my client. I'm not in a private space. If I take the plane, I can't do that either. If I drive, I have to reimburse the miles and pay my aide labor for driving. If I take ElecTrip, I get to sit in the back and bill my client as I go to my client. And so they actually end up making money on that trip. Oh, wow. And that's one of the reasons why we think we're going to grow pretty fast. We found our verticals that we succeed in, and we're targeting those aggressively.
Okay, awesome. And any thoughts on like utilizing like the autopilot feature? Because you have like professional drivers, even Uber, like they plan on like autonomous driving. So any thoughts on that?
100%. Yeah. As sad as it is to say, the automotive industry will transition to a place where autonomous driving will take over. It'll take longer in a corporate setting because they have more liability with their employees. So they're going to want a human still in the car as the last fail-safe, right? Okay. Autonomous driving would then assist in preventing accidents from occurring. And actually, we already use it to stop accidents from occurring. That's one of the main drivers for why companies really love us, because of the safety factor, right? So already on one of our rides, autonomous driving, like the autopilot on Teslas can see one car ahead of the car ahead of it. So it can use its radar, forward-facing radar, to see one car in front of it, right? Or two cars in front of it. And so there was a near collision event that occurred, and the Tesla knew it was going to happen before my driver could even see it and started slowing down. So it's already being used in conjunction with drivers. And I think in the future, though, autonomous driving will definitely replace human driving. It's an unfortunate fact, right? Because
I mean, I don't think it's unfortunate necessarily.
Right.
I know that it can be perceived that way, but I mean, it's the natural progression of technology.
It does suck, man. I try to pay my drivers really well, because that matters to me, right? Like for them to be able to make enough money to go home and be happy, right? So I pay them like $15 an hour plus a huge multiplier based on what the clients say about them, and then they get a tip on top of that. So their average hourly wage is usually around $22. Really, really cool. But yeah, I mean, the economy always evolves, right? What are you going to do?
Yeah. So, I mean, are you going to be working on these companies after you graduate?
Yeah. So I had a full-time offer that I turned down. Very hard decision for me to make, again, because of my background, the safety net. It would have meant a lot to my family, right? To have someone in their like family making consistent income.
Yeah.
But yeah, I turned it down. It wasn't me.
Where was it from?
It was from BP. It was from their trade floor.
Nice.
Yeah. So I actually recruited with them for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And it was something that I really wanted to do, or I thought I wanted to do. And then ultimately, when I got there, I realized that my skill set probably wouldn't be that useful here.
Okay.
You know?
And so you just spoke briefly on your family. I want to kind of run with that real quick. And it's that me and you both are from like South Asian kind of background, right? And it's very common to like be your parents forcing you into some sort of education, right? It's like lawyer, doctor, engineer, etc., right? And it's like joked about in the millennial space, but it's like if you take a step back, it's there, like it's still prevalent, right? Like there are still parents forcing people on certain education paths. So is that something like that you experienced or anything like that?
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because brown parents then are the most proud when you make it as an entrepreneur, right?
Exactly.
Like they don't know really what they want.
Yeah.
They want both things, right? They want you to be everything.
Just want you to be successful.
Exactly, in one way or another. But yeah, they definitely want you to take the safer route, right? They took a lot of risk coming from their country to this one. They worked really hard. Most parents work really hard. All parents, right? Not even just immigrant parents, to get you the opportunities to like go to UT. Right. And then when a company says, hey, I'm willing to pay you 6 figures, come work for us. And you say, no, I want to work at minimum wage, basically 80 hours a week. You know, it scares them.
Yeah.
That's something that my parents definitely felt, right? When I said, let's do this, like I'm doing this like full time. They always supported me, right? Because that's what they'll do.
Yeah, that's what parents do.
Right.
But as far as like education in the sense of like what you actually wanted to do, like engineering, was that something you were genuinely passionate about?
Genuinely, I loved engineering, man, because it was like a way to add value to an economy, right? So a lot of times people will say trading, right? This is so weird that I wanted to do trading after getting into college, because it's a zero-sum game, meaning that if you win a trade, somebody else lost, right?
Yeah.
If you're up in your P&L, someone else lost because you traded against them. Engineering has the opportunity to be a positive sum activity where you're adding value to the world, right? You're bringing more people out of poverty with technologies that, you know, that they can buy, that they can make their lives better with, things like that.
I haven't seen it described that way, but I can tell you're passionate just by the way you described it.
Well, right. Like if you think about, you know, we're in the best point we've been in history, right? Like Bill Gates eradicated diseases in Africa. Like that's crazy. And that's a result of engineering.
Yeah, definitely. So
At least
like partially actually. But 2 companies, you're running them simultaneously. That makes you a lot more qualified than, you know, most people in the entrepreneurship space to speak on this. And it's that, what are some like misconceptions that people have about startups?
Yeah, I think that they think that it's going to be easier than like normal work. So they identify something that they're good at and they say, wow, this is so much easier than like having to go and get my full degree. So I'm just going to drop out and pursue this thing. It ends up being 2 or 3 times harder than what they could have done in a corporate job, because the ramp up for difficulty in a corporate job is pretty linear, right? You get to ease into it, right? There are trainings, you still get paid for those trainings, you're comfortable. In an entrepreneurial setting, you hit the ground running, right? And if you ever get tired, someone else is going to pass you up.
Exactly.
So there's no point that you can rest, right? And so that's why I back to the hustler thing. If you spend some good amount of time understanding a good like foundation for yourself, that will help you a lot, right? Because I had to learn impromptu a lot of things like social media marketing. Like, I had no idea, right? How to fundraise, things like that. You couldn't learn, but then the problem is like experience is the best teacher. So
Yeah.
maybe you just go do it, right?
No, I mean, a lot of people say that you just jump in it and like, yeah, you know, like you said, you're good at like ElecTrip maybe, right? But you don't
Right.
know about marketing, etc.
Exactly.
And so you have to learn those things on the side. And I think that's why people prefer like learning through startups. Like it's the best learning experience
Yeah.
that you can have.
And I think the reason why I'm trying to be a little more cautious towards it is because I recognize what that can do to you as a person, right? Because you're going to push yourself to the edge,
Oh,
right?
for
And
sure.
you have to strengthen,
Yeah.
right?
So, I mean, speaking on that, then when times do get tough during your startups, especially since you run two of them,
Yeah.
what like keeps you going? Because I know personally that there have been times where you get pushed to the edge, like you said, and you know you do fall off, like, and you have to get back up. But how do you prevent yourself from getting like too far?
Yeah, so mechanical engineering analogy for you. So like the way steel, one of the ways you can harden steel is stress hardening, right? So you just keep folding it over and folding it over and rolling it out. And that's a little bit of what the entrepreneurial journey is, right? Like you're going to be pushed to the edge. You're going to need something to kind of like let you know that the next day is a new day, right? Like, and for me, that is cool co-founders that I enjoy working with, right? Like that's how I keep going. If I didn't have co-founders that I enjoyed working with, I would probably not do two startups, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's every time I get on a meeting with Taylor, it's so refreshing, right? Every time I talk to Elliot, I feel like, wow, like this guy's like standing next to me, right? You don't feel alone. Entrepreneurship, it's really sad, man. I went to this competition in Colorado, and the guys talked very candidly. It's this organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. I know, not really that original, but they talked about like their members, man, and how entrepreneurs have the highest suicide rates.
Oh yeah,
in the US.
no, that's kind of where I was gonna go
okay.
with this. Yeah, like
Yeah.
like in the past 4 years or something, but no one talks about it, right? Because
Right.
I mean, I speak with this with every one of my guests, and it's like most of them have like articles and like whatnot and videos and like all those things produced for them because of their
Right.
journey, right? And everyone on social media will be scrolling through those articles and
They
stuff.
see
and
all
be
the
like, wow.
highlights, right?
Exactly, but like I can just imagine like you sitting like at home after like a long day and realizing that, oh, Sunco's not going the way that it
Yeah.
wants to be. And you do have a co-founder, but I feel like it's still something that you have to deal with
Yeah.
individually. So how do you like let's transition to that. How
Sure.
do you take care of yourself mentally during like that kind of period that you go through?
Yeah, sure. I want to be arrogant and just say just power through it, but that's not true, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so admirable to be like, oh, I'm just that strong, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the case. I'll paint a picture for you. So at one point in time, Sunco, like our lawyer was charging us a lot of money for the patent, right? The dude charged me like $100 to get coffee with him, like it was ridiculous. But he's very good. But he charged a lot, right? So Sunco was draining through cash rapidly, right? Sunco was literally like, if we don't win this next competition or raise money in some way in the next week, we won't be able to pay our lawyer, and then we don't know what he's gonna like do, right? Like maybe he'll just suspend our patent, but it could get worse, right? So that was one issue that I was dealing with, and then ElecTrip had to make payments on 2 Teslas at the same time, and at that time we were like limping along with revenue, right? Like sometimes we'd get lucky and somebody would book like 3 or 4 rides in the month. Sometimes nobody would book for like 2-3 weeks, right? And so I'm out here driving the vehicle on Uber and Lyft, literally whatever I can to try to make it work. And when I get done, I don't get to enjoy a beer with my friends. I'm typing up a competition application or something that can get Sunco some money, right? So I was being pulled apart on both ends. And the thing that kept me sane or like put together was a realization that you're not alone in this. Like, I'm not talking about my co-founders. I'm talking about my individual journey through the entrepreneurial process. Like, this is not an isolated incident, right? People that are entrepreneurs go through this. This is something that everybody goes through. Harpering back to EO, one of the questions they asked all the established entrepreneurs that are much more experienced than us, older than us, they asked, like, who has gotten money stolen from you? Every single one of them, all 28 of them raised their hand. It's like crazy how many things happen to entrepreneurs that happen to others, right? And so for you to recognize that, wow, like other people go through this,
Yeah.
that's a bit more of a settling proposition, right? I wish I could give more concrete advice. I wish I knew who was listening to this podcast so I could say.
No, I mean,
for
I
you.
think that's like perfect because I think that it's more of you have to self-reflect and figure out what exactly your own purpose is for why you're building what you're building.
Yeah.
And like then you understand like, okay, that this is what I want to do. Like, for example, I mean, it might seem like not contextually as big of a deal as like what you're doing or like what other people are doing, but like for this podcast even, right? Like scheduling everything, and like sometimes you feel like, it's a lot of work. You know what? I don't want to do this. I don't want to go in. And then I look at the reviews, or like I look at some of the messages that I got from my friends, and it's like, oh, like this is something that, you know, people are genuinely interested in, like I should continue to do it. So I think it just loops back around to figuring out why you're doing it, the purpose of what you're doing, and who you're helping along the way.
That's actually a good point, man. I think your response was better than mine, because what I effectively said was recognizing that other people go through it with you can make you feel better about it, but that's not really true. Then you just feel bad about the entire thing, because then you're like, other people feel bad. What you just said is similar to what a lot of pro athletes do, right? So Michael Phelps, this dude knew exactly how many. You remember how in the Olympics, like his goggles got like water in them or whatever, so he couldn't see.
Yeah.
But he had visualized those laps so many times that he didn't even need to see. Like he literally could just keep doing it, right? And so a lot of athletes that are working up towards like an NFL trophy or something like that, what they do is they visualize themselves getting that trophy handed to them, right? Time and time and time again. And they let themselves kind of sit in those emotions and feel what that would feel like to finally make it to that end goal. And that's what motivates them to not go out on a Friday night and work on what they're doing. That's what motivates them to reschedule with, you know, people that are just like blowing you off for podcasts or whatever. Like whatever your personal struggle is, if you really visualize what it means to the people that are using your product and to yourself to be successful, that's a really powerful thing.
As far as the premise of this podcast goes, a lot of people like are on the edge, like, and I like to describe this as like an imaginary cliff kind of, right? So it's like a lot of people are on the edge of like pursuing their passion, and like you said, like nobody wants to take that, especially because there's more awareness around how difficult this space is now, right? A little bit more.
Yes.
But people won't make that jump. Like if they're good at something, they'll be like, okay, I'm gonna step back and I'll still do this and maybe do this on the side. But how do you go all in? Like how do you make that jump?
Yeah, I mean, man, that's tough. I love these questions. Like, they're very, very in depth.
How did you do it? I mean, for Sunco,
Yeah.
like I guess that was more of a progression thing. But did you have a chip on your shoulder, or was there something else that was kind of driving you to do this, or?
Yeah, I mean, no. So definitely, man. It was basically just a recognition of like what that end goal looked like for me, right? We just talked about it. Like what kept me going when things got tough was visualizing what that end goal looks like. Right?
No, but like jumping into it before it even started.
Right. No, so that's what I'm saying. So I knew that the career path that I was going down at BP wasn't going to help me get to that end vision that I wanted. Right. Okay. So like if I kept down that path, I would have been comfortable, but I would have become something that that's not who I wanted to be. Right. Mm-hmm. So I knew that, okay, this is an opportunity that I'm given and not many people have it. Right. If you divide your life up into quadrants, right, you have till you're 25. Right. And then maybe around 30, 32, you get a family. And then from like 30 to 50, like you're in like a family time,
it's
right?
harder to make like those kinds of decisions.
Right. And so like how many times will you get the opportunity to like pursue one of your goals? Right. How many times will you get the opportunity to pursue something that you really want to? I mean, if you don't do it now and you say, oh, I'm going to do it later, well, really think about how short your life is. Like, it's tragically short, you know? And after you're 30, dude, like, the time and the responsibilities you have just keep racking up, right? Mm-hmm. They just keep getting more and more. And, like, not to get morbid, but, I mean, just think about, like, the way time progresses, right? Like, your family's getting older. You know, you need to do stuff with your life that's more permanent. So if you're going to try temporary things, do it now. That's kind of my decision calculus. I was like, dude, Sunco, you know, solar energy is really important. I want to be able to create like microgrids. I want to be able to create cleaner energy that's actually affordable. Mm-hmm. This is an opportunity to do it. And if I wait, someone else might do it, maybe, or they may not. And then it's like, you sit there thinking like, you know, you're just like sitting there like, wow, I regret myself so much, you know?
And you don't want to feel that.
Yeah, it's terrible, man. I'd rather like sleep on the couch of the ETC couple times than to be like sleeping in my California queen bed, like, or king bed, and thinking like, wow, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah. And a lot of people do go through that.
Yeah.
Listen, you're a smart guy though. Do you know what your name means?
Yeah, it's the mind's light or something like that.
Yeah, the lamp. Let me read it here. Lamp of the mind.
It
basically means that you have a very sharp mind, and I don't think that you fall short of that. I think you live up perfectly to the name. And I said this off the podcast as well, and it's that I really appreciate the fact that you're not a loud entrepreneur. Like everything you've talked about on here, this is probably the most like insightful like podcasts that I've like done, and that's not to say that the other guests weren't, but it's very insightful that you are actually like this, but you don't like push it in people's face like, oh look, this is what I'm doing. So I really appreciate that you're like that, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences. Do you have anything that you want to promote or anything that people should check out or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, Sunco is looking for testing interns and people to join our team. So again, we create solar trackers that are much more affordable and can be used in a wide variety of applications. We'd love to, if anybody's interested, reach out to us and just say, hey, I heard about you on the podcast. And you can reach out to my personal email. Maybe you guys can somehow put it on the screen.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. And then for ElecTrip, really it's a B2B product right now, and kind of for the people that live in like River Oaks. But one of the things we are looking for are people that are pretty passionate about EV adoption. So if you care about EV adoption, like both teams are growing, we need more people. So if you guys are interested in joining, I can give you a more specific role at Sunco. At ElecTrip, it's going to be, forgive the pun, but you're going to be along for the ride. So like just run with it. But yeah, reach out if you guys are interested in working with us.
All right, well, I think that's a perfect stopping point. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for your time.
I really appreciate it.
All right,
Cool.
I'll give it to you right now.
I have to maybe finish up.